Well, good afternoon, all you people out there on Facebook and YouTube and sitting around just looking up subjects to read up on or to create a talk or anything. Today, I've talked a bit about this before in some of my rants, but I think one of the things that we really should do before we pull the pin, before we do the last thing we can in consciousness, is to give thanks for all the things we have. So think about when you were first born. In my particular case, my mom died when I was born because she had pneumonia, and at that particular time, they didn't have a lot of drugs. So let's put a positive spin on that one. And I came out of the mix healthy because I didn't have pneumonia, and so that's a plus right there. So I could have easily died at the birth at the same time and also been affected by pneumonia that my mom had. So looking back at all the places that we were, when we were born, all the times we went to school and we had to learn how to walk around. And I can remember lots of time on the farm, there was opportunity there where a person could have been drowned. He could have been drowned in one of the scoop outs. Or there were a lot of wells around too. We could have actually fallen into one of the wells and been drowned. And there were also lots of farm animals. We always had horses and cows and bulls and all kinds of stuff around. And there was always a danger of being hurt by a farm animal. Sometimes they're very strong. They could step on you and hurt you. Or if you're small, they could bunch you or get some of these goats with horns on. They can actually take a run at you. But as a child, you damn soon remember to stay away from the ones that hurt you. I can remember we had a big red rooster on the farm. He stood about, I guess I would be about 7 or 8 years old, and this damn rooster standing up, he'd be about 1.5 feet tall, had a big comb on top of his head, and for some reason he liked to harass me. And he would never attack my uncle because my uncle would have kicked him halfway across the yard. And I guess these chickens or these roosters, they size up people walking around the yard and they try to pick on somebody that's smaller than them. So I was about 7 or 8 at the time. So a couple of times he chased me across the yard and they'd run like hell to keep away from them because they got sharp claws and they can peck you and hurt you. So finally, I was chased across the yard a couple of times, and we had a dog, but sometimes the dog was with me, and sometimes he was not. If a dog was there, I would stick the dog on him, but maybe that's why the rooster was peed off with me, because I got the dog to chase him back into his pen once in a while. But nevertheless, I made my mind up one day. I thought, I've had enough of this damn rooster, I've got to do something to turn him around a little bit. So one day I went out to the bush. I took a little axe and went out and I cut a little green tree, like a Christmas tree. And it would be about 3 feet tall, something like that. And the size of the tree would probably be about, maybe about the size of your finger. And I had that I had a coat. So I put this thing, it was about maybe 3 feet tall, and I put it under my coat. And I walked across the yard. And I thought, just let that bugger come over to chase me now this time. So I kept my eye on him, and finally I could see him coming across the yard. He was going to tackle me. So I reached under my coat and I grabbed this Christmas tree by the big end of the stick. And he came over to me and I flailed him and I knocked him right off his legs. And I went over top and he's sitting there and I spanked him on top of the head a few times with this tree, this small Christmas tree. I just hammered him into the ground a little bit. It didn't break any bones or anything like that, but it sure as hell shook him up a little bit. And so I whacked him a few times, knocked him off his feet several times. And when he was down, I hit him over the back a couple of times. And finally he was looking away to get away, and when he started running away, I just gave him a good spank on the rear end as he left. And from that day forward, he stayed the hell away from me. And I think it was he finally realized that there was something there, and I carried the stick around for a while just in case, but he kept his distance. So I learned something there. When you get these bloody mean animals on the farm, especially the rooster, because they can hurt you. They got these sharp, real sharp claws on them. They can tear your hide, tear your skin, and they can also peck you really hard too. They can peck your face, peck your eyes out, and they're nothing to fool around with. So this rooster, after that, he kept his distance. I never had a problem with him after that. And all I would have to do is, if I had a green jacket on, I would just shake my coat at him a little bit, and he'd bugger off the other way. So I think we have to think back and say about how lucky we were. Getting back to the having the scoop outs on the farm, the scoop out was probably about 8 or 10 feet of water, and we used to swim a little bit, but they were tapered on one end, so you kind of swam at the low end, so you're up to about your knees, and we were kind of careful that way. And then at the school, we used to go down after school to the Kiskatnaw River, and it ran pretty quickly, but the water was not deep. There was places where water was about, maybe 2 feet deep. And as long as you didn't fall down and bang your head and knock yourself out, you could always walk through the water and also find a deep enough pool that you could swim and get wet and enjoy yourself on a hot day. So that was a common thing, but there were people that actually got drowned in some of the deeper parts. So we, as young people, I kind of stayed a heck away from the deep stuff. And at that particular time, we didn't know anything about life jackets because we didn't have a boat with life jackets on it. And life jackets, I don't think they started coming into fruition until probably about 1960s, 50s, or 60s. In fact, never used to see them out on the rivers and lakes until we got into the bigger boats. So we managed to keep through that, and we're also involved in falling trees down and stuff like that and cutting them up for wood. So my uncle was very cautious about making darn sure that you knew how to fall a tree down. You had to nick it on one side and then go on the opposite side and cut it. And they taught you how to fall it and make the tree fall in a certain direction by undercutting it on one side and then cutting the opposite side and either putting a piece of string or a piece of rope on it to pull it over, or use a long stick to reach up and push the tree to make it fall over. So we avoided accidents that way. And that was kind of a common thing. I think it's more of a common sense than anything. And horses, we had to be awfully careful with horses because horses are so strong and they can step on your foot and break your feet and also kick you. I had a cousin who was killed with a horse kicked him with the side of the foot, hit him on the side of the head and smashed his head and killed him dead. Animals are very, 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 you got to be very careful. One of my brother-in-laws was walking through a gate, and he was an older guy at the time. He was about 50. Went to walk through this gate, and this young heifer, female cow, squeezed through and pinned his leg against the gate and broke his ankle, or broke his his knee. So animals are so powerful, you ought to be really careful. And then there was on the farm we had all kinds of moving parts. We had tractors and plows and stuff like that. And there was a farmer not too many miles away from us that was killed with a tractor. He was plowing on a bit of a side hill. The tractor had a double furrow plow behind it. He was pulling it. And something happened. The tractor tipped over. And the tractor landed partly on top of him. So what happened, the tractor, one wheel was on the ground and the other one was on top of the man's body because the thing was in gear and running, and the tire actually tore all the inside parts off his stomach area, lay there running away. Somebody drove by and seen a tractor out in the middle of the field there with the wheel spinning, and they went up and found the operator had been killed by the tire rotating around and causing major injury to the owner. So we always had to think about those kind of things, and sometimes a little forethought ahead of time will cause accident prevention to happen. And then as we got older, we had to learn how to drive, and Then it becomes a matter of learning how to put chains on the car, and also going up on steep hills, you had to make sure you had fairly good tires and put chains on when you needed them, and all. And so there was all kinds of ways to get hurt. And combines on the farm, combines had a lot of moving parts. You had the reel on the front and the sickle bar for cutting off that stuff. All kinds of opportunities. You could cut your hands off or legs off and get hurt. And there were a lot of people on farms who were injured, especially in Saskatchewan. They had a farm safety film there. A lot of people had their feet cut off and their legs cut off, had their hands cut off, and real bad stuff because they wouldn't shut them down when they got off the tractor and left them running and then went back to work on something and got their hands tangled up and were injured by the tractor left running. So we have to give thanks that we were, I guess we were lucky we had coaching from older people where we didn't get involved in those kinds of things. And somebody was watching, like we always had our parents or uncle or grandma or some of our grandfather or somebody watching, kind of watching when you're outside, when you're using axes and stuff like that and saws that you had to be concerned about, especially with the buzz saw. They had these buzz saws that they used to have take an engine off a tractor, mount it onto a wagon, and then they would hook a belt up and put a saw. It'd be a mandrel where the belt went around, and then it'd be a high-speed saw blade turning, rotating, and we put logs up there and cut them off. So there are all kinds of opportunity to get your hands cut off, or I could walk by and fall into the saw because the saw was always running. We had one guy that had his arm cut really bad there, Peter Woodmark. He slipped and fell somehow or tried to move the machine and slipped and fell into the saw when it was running and had a bad cut on his arm. So those things, just the sound of the saw, high-pitched blade spinning round and round was enough to scare the hell out of you because if you were going to throw blocks, you had to hold the blocks. They would put the log out past, and then somebody would push the log into the saw, and then the saw would cut the block off, and it would fall on the ground. So I used to work as a throwing blocks. You'd sit there and grab a hold of the block. When the saw cut it off, then you'd throw it into a pile. And you had to be cautious because sometimes they put the log, there'd be a 10 or 15-foot log with 2 or 3 people holding the log, and then the sawyer was sawing it off. So, but if you grabbed a hold of the block before it was cut off, and somebody got the darn thing caught on a twig on their pants, they might pull it back. And if you had to have your hands out there and the guy pushing the log through the saw, you get going pretty fast after a while, and you had to be really careful because a couple of times I remember the log getting caught in somebody's shirt and they pulled it back, and if you didn't watch, you could have your wrists and your hands pushed through the buzzsaw and cut off. So I think we have to look back and say, my God, we were lucky. All the belts and hoses and fans and stuff like that, where we could have been seriously injured, we escaped that. And we also escaped the major accidents out on the highway driving. And one thing that I really appreciated with the highways ministry, our driver trainers, and we'd have a defensive driving course about every 2 to 3 years. And in the driving course, there were safety films talking about safe stopping distances, always allow enough space between the vehicles. So if a deer ran out on the road or a moose or a car drove out and the guy had to stop it, he wouldn't be too close and crash into him. Kind of a guideline with the length of 2 telephone poles. You're driving down the highway and you watch ahead of you and make sure when the car ahead of you passes one of the poles, the telephone pole, that you look at and count how many poles before you get there. And a good count would be 2 poles. So allow you enough distance so you're not too close. Then the other thing that happened, it'd be somebody following you, and even though you kept your distance between the guy ahead of you, guy would pass you and then pull in, and all of a sudden it's too close. So that means that you have to slow down and back up, slow down and just let your vehicle slow down and let the guy gain speed ahead of you to get your safety cushion back again. And those kind of things we learned from the defensive driving courses. Very, very, very good. And that was the thing that I learned every time, was not to follow when you're following a car, allow that distance. 2.5 second rule, or 2 telephone poles is ample time. And it's different because if you got a small car, they'll stop quicker. But you get a big truck with a trailer behind, the stopping distance can be up to 1/4 of a mile compared to a car, which would be maybe a half a telephone pole distance. It was great. So we have to think about all the opportunities we missed. And right now, when we're walking downtown too, we had a lady in town that was crushed up against a wall. She was walking down the street, and somebody drove into a parking place and drove in, I guess, too fast, and bounced over the curb, and then the person knocked the person up against a wall. It was a cement wall, and she wound up having broken bones, and was in the hospital for months and months and months to get healed up from that. So when you read about that or you hear about those kind of things, it's a message for us. Now, when I'm going downtown, if I see a car that's driving into the sidewalk, into a parking place, and they're pulling in, I stop. I stop walking. I let them park their vehicle. When they get out of the vehicle, then I walk past. And the other thing that can happen when a vehicle is pulling away from the curb, somebody gets into the car and they're backing out, and it's awful easy for them to put the darn thing into a forward gear and step on the gas and jump the curb and run into you and smash against the building. So the safe thing I do is, if a vehicle is driving into a parking spot or backing out of a parking spot, I just wait, and then after they're out, then I walk in the spot where the car used to be. And also, we had one guy ran over down in a spot downtown here in Nelson where a car was backing up, and he wanted to talk to the driver, but he walked behind the car, and of course the guy didn't see him, so he got knocked down and the car backed over him. And that's a bad one, because we have to remember that the guy looking in the mirror is only a small mirror compared to the size of the windshield. So when you walk behind a car, the guy probably won't see you because there's not a bunch of mirrors there. He's got maybe a couple small mirrors, one on each side, and one a rearview mirror over his shoulder out the back window. But it's very easy for a person not to be seen. So it's a good practice not to walk behind cars or trucks that are backing up out of a parking place. No matter how badly you want to talk to the guy, go in front so he can see you, and always try and get the driver's eyes. If you can see the person's eyes, you can wave at them and they can stop and you can converse. But remember, the car is so heavy and strong, and trucks as well, that they'd back over top of you and never even hardly feel it. The driver might hear you bumping your head on the floor or on one of the fenders, but by that time you could be dead. So we have to think about that. And also walking across the intersections. Even though there's marked there, there's marking for the intersection for the crosswalk, sometimes people have other things on their mind. Maybe they're taking somebody to the hospital, or maybe they're just driving down the road and they've had a couple of beer, or they've got something on their mind, and you're on a crosswalk, but they don't stop. And the other thing that I find is sometimes on the 4-lane ones, there'll be a crosswalk, so you're walking on the curb and you step off the curb and the car in the curb lane sees you and stops. So make darn sure you don't walk out to the other lane, because the guy on the left-hand lane, it can be passing the car that stopped for you. So if you walk out and the guy in the passing lane doesn't see you, you might get hit. You'll be in the second lane, but you get ran over because the guy can't see you because you're being hidden by the car. So be very careful walking across on crosswalks. I'm just trying to put some things together to prevent accidents for seniors. And I've had a near miss with that one down there by SK Electronics, where I walked off the crosswalk, across the crosswalk. I got the guy's attention on the curb vehicle, stopped, and then I just kind of stuck my head out between past the car so I could look down and see if anybody was coming. And this curb lane car went through, did about 40, 50 miles an hour. Zoom! Had I not seen him, I would have probably got smucked. So we have to be careful. Be careful. Don't walk behind vehicles that are backing up, and also on crosswalks. If you stop, if the curb lane, the guy on the near the curb stops, don't assume that the other guys are going to stop too, because sometimes he's passing and he don't understand that there's a guy there walking on the crosswalk, and he don't see him, especially if it's a small child being hidden by the side of the vehicle. So you guys have yourself a safe evening, and may the world treat you really well. And remember, we always got lots of stuff to be thankful for. And every morning we wake up, it's a new day. And remember, tomorrow is going to be a better day than today, because we'll have some new things, maybe some new people, new opportunities again, get a brand new day. And we never know how many days we're having left, how many Saturdays or Sundays or whatever. So it's really important that we live in the moment and not get hung up if something happened 2 or 3 years ago. It's in the rearview mirror. We don't have to look at it anymore. And so live in the moment. When we're driving, watch for cars up front, watch for guys passing. And if there's anything you like doing, like as we're getting older now, I do lots of walking, and it's really nice because I meet people. But if there's anything you want to do, it doesn't matter whether it's fishing or hunting, whatever, or walking, go and do it now and enjoy it. The one thing that I think is affecting our seniors is too much sitting. Now, if people can't walk, if you've got broken ribs or ankles or problems with your legs or lower legs, and you can't walk, that's a whole different story. But anytime we're able to, and our muscles are strong, we should walk as much as we can to keep our leg muscles strong, because remember, that's what balances us. Anytime we're standing on the curb, and we need the muscles in our legs to steady us. And so don't be ashamed to buy a cane one day and use it for a little bit of extra balance, because as we get older, if we keep our muscles in good shape, it helps. But having that cane might be a good thought as we get a bit older, and there's some really nice canes around. So have yourself a great evening, and may you be a half an hour in heaven before the devil finds out you're missing. Bye for now.